a firefighter from Barbican started to make his way up the escalator, and you could see by the look on his face that there was something big going on.
Moorgate in the city was the scene of the Underground's worst ever disaster. A packed tube rammed the buffers at a terminus, and in the enclosed space below ground there was nowhere for the train to go. It crumpled, killing 43, including the driver. Alcohol was found in his blood.
I just arrived at work just before 9 a.m. and was walking into the casualty department at Barts, where I'd been a junior doctor for about 2 months. And I was greeted by my boss, who had just put down the telephone. He'd had a call to say that a train had run into the buffers at Moorgate Underground station, and he asked me to go down there. I was assured that this was usually nothing very much and just a few people with a few bruises. So I was equipped with a satchel with a few bandages in it, and a medical student who also had a small first aid kit was sent to accompany me. When I got there, it was total chaos. There were firemen everywhere, there was police, there were people coming out of the station covered in dust and dirt. I was sort of ushered downstairs onto the platform. It was very dirty, pretty dark, because there was only emergency lighting, and there were firemen everywhere, and it was all chaos. One of the first things I had to do was to go into one of the carriages, which subsequently became apparent, which was actually the third carriage. Found a woman who'd been trapped by her foot. The floor of the carriage had buckled and her foot had got trapped underneath it. She was otherwise okay. I left the fireman to get on and release her. After that, I then was taken further into the blind ending tunnel, and I'm never quite sure which carriage, whether I got into the very first carriage, but I certainly got into the second carriage. It was mangled, there was bodies everywhere, the roof was collapsed in, so it was only about 4 feet high. Access was terribly difficult. But I wasn't wearing any protective gear. In those days, I'd just been sent down. I was wearing a white coat, no hard hat, no nothing, apart from just looked like as though I'd walked off the ward. When I was there, we released one chap, I seem to remember, who was trapped by some dead people. There were bodies contorted and strewn everywhere. Anyway, we managed to get one live victim out, and I think he'd probably got a broken leg. He was in a considerable amount of pain, but the access was very, very difficult. I do remember that seemed quite quickly to be joined by another doctor from Barts whom I knew, Phil Finch, who was actually an anaesthetist. He helped a lot, and I do remember one poor woman who was trapped. She'd been thrown over the front of a seat, and the roof had come down on top of her. So she was really pinned down, and she was in agony, and Phil managed to put up a drip and gave her a small dose of morphine intravenously, and then she died very quickly. Anyway, I spent some time in the tunnel, and then after what seemed like not a long time, although probably several hours that had elapsed, I remember coming out onto the platform. Again, you had to squeeze between the carriage, which was buckled, and the side wall of the tunnel, so it was only one person at a time that could squeeze down that gap. I remember being quite surprised to see how many doctors by then had arrived on the scene. The London hospital had been alerted, and they'd sent a well-equipped team to set up a casualty clearing station. I suppose I was a bit shell-shocked and all stunned in a way, because I didn't realise how big an event this was until afterwards. We had no idea how many people had been injured or killed. And of course, one of the features of any major incident is that you get the walking wounded appear in hospitals and get taken away by ambulances and appear in hospital very quickly after an event. And it's the more seriously injured people who get rescued and they turn up in hospitals. And in fact, it was, I think, something like 9 o'clock that evening before the last live casualty was extracted from the wreckage.
By the time the camera team was allowed down into the tunnel, there were no signs of the casualties or the two survivors who were at that stage still trapped in the front coach.
Information flow was poor by modern standards, and the information getting to people like myself was virtually none. It was difficult to know at the time how many people were dead, and it was very much up to the fire brigade, who were very much in charge inside the wreckage, to guide us to people who needed help. Even now, 45 years later, whenever I get onto an underground train, I'm reminded of the horror of that day at Moorgate Underground Station, when so many lives were lost.